Shemuel Aleph, or 1 Samuel 15 through 17. And Shemuel said to Sha'ul, Yehovah sent me to anoint you sovereign over his people, over Israel. And now listen to the voice of the words of Yehovah. Thus said Yehovah of hosts, I shall punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself up against him on the way when he came up from Mitzrayim. Now go, and you shall strike Amalek and put under the ban all that he has, and you shall not spare them, and put to death from man to woman, from infant to nursing child, from ox to sheep, from camel to donkey. Then Sha'ul summoned the people and mustered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Yehudah. And Sha'ul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in the wadi. And Sha'ul said to the Canaanites, Go turn aside, come down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you did show loving commitment to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Mitzrayim. So the Canaanites turned aside from the midst of the Amalekites. And Sha'ul struck the Amalekites from Halalah all the way to Shur, which is before Mitzrayim. And he caught Agag, sovereign of the Amalekites, alive, and put under the ban all the people with the edge of the sword. But Sha'ul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and the cattle and the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not put them under the ban, but all goods, despised and worthless, that they put under the ban. And the word of Yehovah came to Shemuel, saying, I am grieved that I've set up Sha'ul as sovereign, for he has turned his back from following me and has not performed my words. And it displeased Shemuel, and he cried to Yehovah all night. And Shemuel rose early in the morning to meet Sha'ul, and it was told to Shemuel, saying, Sha'ul went to Carmel, and see, he set up a monument for himself, and turned and passed over and went down to Gilgal. And Shemuel came to Sha'ul, and Sha'ul said to him, Blessed are you of Yehovah, I have performed the word of Yehovah. But Shemuel said, What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of cattle which I hear? And Sha'ul said, They've brought them from Amalek, because the people spared the best of the sheep and the cattle to slaughter to Yehovah your Elohim. And the rest we've put under the ban. And Shemuel said to Sha'ul, Wait, and let me declare to you what Yehovah said to me last night. And he said to him, Speak. And Shemuel said, Though you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not Yehovah anoint you sovereign over Israel? And Yehovah sent you on the way and said, Go, and you shall put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. And why did you not obey the voice of Yehovah, but swooped down on the spoil and did evil in the eyes of Yehovah? And Sha'ul said to Shemuel, I did obey the voice of Yehovah, and I went on the way which Yehovah sent me, and I brought back Agag, sovereign of Amalek. And I put Amalek under the ban. But the people took of the spoil, of the sheep, of the cattle, the best of that which should have been put under the ban, to Slaughter to Yehovah your Elohim in Gilgal. Then Shemuel said, Does Yehovah delight in ascending offerings and slaughterings, as in obeying the voice of Yehovah? Look, to obey is better than a slaughtering. To heed is better than the fat of rams, for rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is as wickedness and idolatry. Because you've rejected the word of Yehovah, he also does reject you as sovereign. And Sha'ul said to Shemuel, I've sinned, for I have transgressed the mouth of Yehovah and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. And now please pardon my sin and return with me, and let me bow myself to Yehovah. But Shemuel said to Sha'ul, I do not return with you, for you have rejected the word of Yehovah, and Yehovah does reject you from being sovereign over Israel. And as Shemuel turned around to go away, Sha'ul took a corner of his robe, and it tore. And Shemuel said to him, Yehovah has torn the reign of Israel from you today, and has given it to a neighbor of yours, better than you. Moreover, the eminence of Israel does not lie nor relent, for he is not a man that he should relent. Then he said, I have sinned, but esteem me now, please, before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me, and I shall bow myself to Yehovah and your Elohim. And Shemuel turned back after Sha'ul, and Sha'ul bowed himself to Yehovah. And Shemuel said, Bring Agag, sovereign of the Amalek, here to me. And Agag came to him delightedly. And Agag said, Truly the bitterness of death has been turned aside. And Shemuel said, As your sword bereaved women, let your mother be bereaved among women too. Shemuel then hewed Agag to pieces before Yehovah in Gilgal. And Shemuel went to Ramah, while Sha'ul went up to his house in Gibeah of Sha'ul. And Shemuel did not see Sha'ul again until the day of his death, for Shemuel mourned for Sha'ul, and Yehovah was grieved that he had made Sha'ul to reign over Israel. Chapter 16. And Yehovah said to Shemuel, How long are you going to mourn for Sha'ul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Yishai, the Bethlehemite, for I have seen among his sons a sovereign for myself. And Shemuel said, How would I go? When Sha'ul hears it, he shall kill me. And Yehovah said, Take a heifer with you, and say, I have come to slaughter to Yehovah. And you shall invite Yishai to the slaughtering. Then let me show you what to do. And you shall anoint for me the one I say to you. And Shemuel did what Yehovah said, and went to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, Do you come in peace? And he said, In peace I have come to slaughter to Yehovah. Set yourselves apart, and you shall come with me to the slaughtering. And he set Yishai and his sons apart, and invited them to the slaughtering. And it came to be, when they came, that he saw Eliab, and thought, The anointed of Yehovah is indeed before him. But Yehovah said to Shemuel, Do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I've refused him. For not as man sees, for man looks at the eyes, but Yahweh looks at the heart. Then Yishai called Abinadab and made him pass before Shemuel, and he said, "Neither has Yehovah chosen this one." Next, Yishai made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has Yehovah chosen this one." And Yishai made 7 of his sons pass before Shemuel, and Shemuel said to Yishai, "Yehovah has not chosen these." And Shemuel said to Yishai, "Are these all the young men?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, and see, he's tending the sheep." And Shemuel said to Yishai, "Send and bring him, for we do not turn round till he comes here." And he sent and brought him in. And he was ruddy with bright eyes and handsome. And Yehovah said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." And Shemuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of Yehovah came upon Dawid from that day and onwards. And Shemuel arose and went to Ramah. And the Spirit of Yehovah turned aside from Sha'ul, and an evil spirit from Yehovah troubled him. And the servants of Sha'ul said to him, "Look, now, an evil spirit from Elohim is troubling you. Please let our master command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skilled player on the lyre. And it shall be when the evil spirit from Elohim is upon you, that he shall play with his hand and you be well." And Sha'ul said to his servants, "Please get me a man that plays well and bring him to me." And one of the servants answered and said, "Look, I've seen a son of Yishai, the Bethlehemite, who knows how to play, a brave one, and a man of battle, and skilled in words, and a handsome man, and Yehovah is with him." So Sha'ul sent messengers to Yishai and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." And Yishai took a donkey loaded with bread and a skin of wine and a young goat, and sent them by his son David to Sha'ul. And David came to Sha'ul and stood before him. And he loved him greatly, and he became his armor-bearer. Sha'ul therefore sent to Yishai, saying, "Please let David stand before me, for he's found favor in my eyes." And it came to be, whenever the evil spirit from Elohim was upon Sha'ul, that David would take a lyre and play it with his hand. Then Sha'ul would become refreshed and well, and the evil spirit would leave him. Chapter 17. And the Philistines had gathered their armies for battle, and came together at Soko, which belongs to Yehudah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah and Ephes Damim. And Sha'ul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to meet the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with the valley in between them. Then a champion came out from the camp of the Philistines, named Golyath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span, and a bronze helmet was on his head, and he was armed with scaled armor, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and bronze shin guards on his legs, and a bronze spear between his shoulders, and the wood of the spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And you, the servants of Sha'ul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me." If he is able to fight with me and shall strike me, then we shall be your servants. But if I overcome him and shall strike him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I shall reproach the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight together." And Sha'ul and Israel heard these words of the Philistine, and they were broken down and in great fear. Now, Dawid was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Yehudah, whose name was Yishai, and he had 8 sons. And in the days of Sha'ul, the man was old among men. And the 3 oldest sons of Yishai went. They had gone to follow Sha'ul to battle. And the names of his 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and his second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest. And the 3 oldest followed Sha'ul. But David went and returned from Sha'ul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Philistine drew near morning and evening and took his stand. Then Yishai said to his son David, "Please take to your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp. And take these 10 cheeses to the commander of the 1,000, and see how your brothers are, and bring back news of them." For Sha'ul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the herdsmen, and took and went as Yishai had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight, and they shouted for the battle. And Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the keeper of supplies, and ran to the army and came and greeted his brothers. And he was speaking with them and saw the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words, and David heard. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, ran from him and were in great fear. And the men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who's come up? For he's come up to reproach Israel, and it shall be that the man who strikes him, the sovereign is going to enrich him with great riches and give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption in Israel." And David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, "What shall be done for the man who strikes this Philistine and shall take away reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should reproach the armies of the living Elohim?" And the people answered him according to this word, saying, "This is what's done for the man who strikes him." And Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's displeasure burned against David, and he said, "Why have you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you've come down to see the battle." And David said, "Now what have I done? Was it not but a word?" And he turned around from him and toward another and said the same word. And these people answered him a word like the first word. And when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Sha'ul, and he sent for him. And David said to Sha'ul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant is going and shall fight with this Philistine." And Sha'ul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, and he is a man of battle from his youth." And David said to Sha'ul, "Your servant has been tending sheep for his father. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued it from its mouth. And when it rose against me, I took hold of it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has stricken both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, seeing he has reproached the armies of the living Elohim. And David said, Yehovah, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he does deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Sha'ul said to David, Go, and Yehovah be with you. And Sha'ul dressed David with his garments. He put on a bronze helmet on his head and put a coat of armor on him. And David girded his sword over his garments and began to go, but he had not tried them. Then David said to Sha'ul, I'm not able to go with these, for I've not tried them. So David took them off, and he took his staff in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the wadi, put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistines. And the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he despised him, for he was a youth and ruddy and of handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his mighty ones. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I give you your flesh to the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field. But David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of Yehovah of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom you have reproached. This day Yehovah shall deliver you into my hand, and I shall strike you and take your head from you, and give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines today to the birds of the heavens and the wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth know that Elohim is for Israel. And all this assembly know that Yehovah does not save with sword and spear. For the battle belongs to Yehovah, and he shall give you into our hands. And it came to be, when the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and slung it. And it struck the Philistine on his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David was stronger than the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. And David ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Yehudah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the way to Sha'araim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel turned back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camps. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his weapons in his tent. And when Sha'ul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of his army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your being lives, O sovereign, I do not know. And the sovereign said, Ask whose son this young man is. And when David returned from the striking of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Sha'ul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Sha'ul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David said, "The son of your servant Yishai, the Bethlehemite."